Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. Residents of a rundown French apartment building battle against an army of deadly, rapidly reproducing spiders. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Infested. Well, Luke, we have arrived to the final spider film of April. Yes, Infested. And thank you over to the folks over at Shudder and IFC Films, as always, for sending us over an early copy to check this thing out. Obviously, we've been talking about spiders a lot this month. Spiders and religious horror seem to have been the theme for the last 60 days or so. And I got to say, I was a big fan of Sting. I know you were as well. We had a good time with that one. Definitely a lot of fun, very 80s felt. And I think watching that and walking out of that, there was a little hesitation for me to just jump right into Infested because I was just like, well, Sting worked out. What are the odds that we're going to have another one that works? You know, I mean, are they going to be too similar? Are they going to kind of, be a little bit, maybe just not what I was looking for in a kind of a spider horror film? Because I feel like although Sting has its some issues, it was a great package. It was a solid deal. I enjoyed the movie. How are you feeling kind of leading up to our watch of Infested?
Oh, I was hesitant as well. Anytime spider horror is announced, like we've talked about on the channel recently, it doesn't, most of the time it's not handled with the best quality. So, it's not on our radar for most of it. And then to have something like Sting pop up, which looked intriguing, and then Infested pop up right after it. And I got to say, that one I was a little less familiar with just because I think I watched the trailer one time, whereas, Sting happenstance, we ended up covering on Sunday Scaries. The little segment that we did caught fire, and then we ended up covering a little bit more of Sting. So it's a little more familiar there. And, after having such a great time with Sting and knowing that that one has so much rewatchability, Infested, to be honest, I was a little less excited for because of that hesitation to say, listen, we barely hit a great spider film over the past decade. What are the chances are we're going to get a double feature in the same month of two great spider flicks? And I got to say, they produced.
Yeah, I honestly I'm right there with you, man. I was surprised. And I think the thing about this is we are dealing with two very different movies.
Hmm.
Tonally, presentation, I mean really the only thing that I would say really links them together is that they both take place in apartment buildings. So, that's about it, and there's spiders, of course, or at least in Sting's thing it's one spider, and here it's dozens,
Several. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
and it's great. But yeah, I mean, this really is a film that has a lot riding on it for people. I know it's kind of unfair because there was some news that was put out there. If you're a horror fan, maybe if you're a casual fan, this doesn't matter to you as much. But director, Sebastian Venick, I believe is how you say that, has been tapped to handle the first of what is to be many Evil Dead spin-off films. So he's already been selected by Sam Raimi and the team over there at Ghost House to tackle an Evil Dead property. And we know they don't just attach anybody to those things. They really do take their time to find somebody with a vision who understands, tension, scares, horror in its purest form. And that's why we love the Evil Dead films so much. But it does, again, kind of put a little bit more pressure on this movie. And by God, do they deliver with all of those elements I just discussed. The tension in this movie, and I do not want to sound hyperbolic when I say this, but I'm being 100% honest with you guys, taking away the whole, YouTuber critic hat thing. I had to turn this movie off twice. I don't do that. I do not do that with horror movies. I watch too many of them to do that. There are things that will disturb me. And spiders, I'm not afraid of spiders. I don't care. I don't want them on me, but like I'm not sitting here saying I have a phobia of them. But the stuff that they have in this film, the way it's framed, the way they build tension, the way that they produce these scares, legitimately got so deep under my skin last night when I was watching this, I had to turn it off and come back to it the next morning to finish it. Full stop.
And you feel this tension from they don't kind of easy into it. You felt from the very beginning. We kind of open up here with a group of men that are in the desert looking for these spiders, and instantly we do see these kind of caverns, these caves that these spiders are making home. So uh, there is this element of smoke that they are going through these dens or whatever, and then we're instantly again great camera placement where we're seeing this perspective of inside a cave, and you're just waiting. You're waiting for that sound. You're waiting for the movement, and it just hits you full blast in the face as soon as everything goes down. And I got to say, from there, it doesn't let up. There is so much tension in this film. When you're dealing with spiders, I think going into that, if spiders already freak you out, you're already going to be tense. But, spiders, I'm like you, where it's not necessarily something that's overly unsettling. When you mention spiders, I'm not unsettled by it. But the way that they use it here with audio beats, just kind of waiting and that lingering of you're waiting for something to go down, it's just so well done. In the camera movement here, there's the scene in the bathroom where we're kind of going from a character back to a door to a character, and then all chaos ensues in between our characters that are arguing. And with that, just with the discussion, everyone's state that they're kind of frantic already, and then the end cap of seeing a bunch of spiders happens. There are so many scenes in here that are so well done and kind of get your heart racing, just because you're in those elements with our characters. And yes, there are spiders around you, but sometimes the spiders aren't even the focal point. It's just what our director is making us feel through that lens.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the key elements that really works in this film, and is something that we're always looking for when we're talking about just films that affect us in the horror genre. And it is, one of the key elements to any filmmaking, any movie ever. It's characters, and I think that Infested has a really great core group of characters, and I think that the actors they have playing them really do bring authenticity, which is something that with it being a foreign film, with it being subtitled, you often hear about people saying that there's a disconnect with that. It doesn't much bother myself or Luke anymore. I can say I think we've seen enough of them that it is just kind of like we just get sucked in, and you kind of forget that the subtitles are there after a while. But like the characters in this are so well realized, and it's not something where we're getting full blown backstory. We're getting just enough to really kind of get us to a point where we're like, I don't want to see anything bad happen to these guys. And I gotta say, the lead actor here, Theo Christine, who plays Kaleb, really won my heart over really early on in the film. I think there's a moment when he first comes into his apartment, when you really see, oh, they're taking this character very differently. They are not just going to be playing this one note kind of one. It's like he's not doesn't want to be a rapper at all, but it's like you kind of get that sense of like he wants to be kind of like running the streets. I want to like make an album, I want to do all this stuff. It seems very stereotypical, low income, kind of, I'm gonna make something of myself, I'm gonna be he doesn't want to do that. He has a passion, he has a hobby, he likes that, and he loves his neighbors, he loves his family, but he's going through a lot. And to see him kind of interacting with these people, it really caught me off guard. And I thought that not only was it portrayed well, but it was written very smart, written very well.
Yeah, and we do dive into these characters. It is the sense we just talked about Abigail and that having camaraderie. I think this does have a sense of camaraderie, not like Abigail does have, but these characters are a little more subtle, I think, and we kind of get those motivations. This is kind of, I guess our characters are maybe caught in the hustle a little bit, where it's just kind of scrounging to get by. And I know our director had said he wanted that kind of social commentary. This film has a great subtext. I don't want to deep dive. We are planning a spoiler talk, so
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
want to absolutely get into it there, because um go out and look about kind of his motivation here using spiders, kind of comparable to He used it to Arabic people as well as black people in terms of, kind of being swatted away and not being given a second look. And when you really understand what he was trying to convey here and then look at it through that lens, it does become very smart because these characters do seem authentic in their struggle and what they're going through. And this kind of element of, I don't know if you paid attention to kind of how the apartments look, where
Yeah.
our main character Kaleb is living with his sister after their mother's death, and you find out that he has grown up there, and then you kind of look at these other characters' apartments that are extremely nice, and they're just a couple floors up, and just kind of how this I don't know if it would I don't know if they're ideally in theory being kicked out of their apartments for this gentrification idea or not, but I think that really does play smartly into what we were trying to say with this film. It is more than a creature feature, but of course we are here for the spiders, and I got to say those are done fairly well also, where it's just that creepiness factor, like you said, Dylan. You had to turn it off. I didn't have to turn it off, but there are so many unsettling scenes involving basic fears that we do have, and involving these creepy crawlies, whether it's in your shoes or just giving things a second look because you thought maybe you had seen something, or seeing something in the mirror and trying to find it through your bedroom. There are so many relatable elements here to build that tension, that I think he's a director as well as co-written this, really had that idea of how he was going to convey this and kind of tense up the audience, which effectively he did.
Yeah, this man, again, when I say that the tension in this is palpable, you feel this in any moment that these spiders are here. And I think it all comes down to that opening sequence really setting the stage well for just what we're kind of in for. And I know to some, maybe that opening will come off as a bit cheesy, just because, it kind of the way that it transpires, it's like, oh, okay, these things are going to be very direct, and they're going to be like, hunting people and kind of thing. It's like, no, it's very much in combatants of just wanting to protect themselves.
Yes.
They're very much acting like animals. There's a sequence in here that I think is one of the absolute best tension building, and just one of the best representations for why you should be afraid of these spiders, and it ultimately sucked me in tenfold. I won't spoil it. I will just say that it involves going into Caleb's bedroom. And obviously, you see it in the trailer. He's a hobbyist when it comes to insects and lizards and things like that. Well, when this spider is introduced, his animals very subtly all react. And it is one of my favorite representations of just why you should fear these spiders. And I think that's the difference here between Sting and Infested. I didn't fear the spider in Sting. I had fun watching the spider and Sting. Spider and Sting felt like a slasher villain or like a xenomorph after a while, where it was like, oh, this is fun to watch. I like watching it get bigger and be more vicious and things. Infested, I was literally sitting there in my bed watching this on my iPad, just saying, my God, if a spider crawled on me right now, I would literally lose my shit. And it's just because they do such a great job. And yes, you see it in the trailer. The spiders do get bigger at one point. Those ones not so much. They do some like great moments with them, but they're not as scary because then it gets kind of out of the realm of believability. But for the majority of this film, they are very realistic, very properly sized, and it's unsettling as all hell. I hated it. I hated some of these scenes. They made me feel so much just like the creepy crawlies got under my skin. I'm trying my best to articulate this without getting into spoilers because I gotta say the scenes that do it, but my God, like I'm serious, guys. Like whether you feel this or not, I am being 100% genuine when I say this is one of those films that just affected me.
And just taking the concepts here, where this does take place in an apartment building, I think they use that effectively as well, where Dylan's talking about kind of building that tension, and there are so many scenes with that where they kind of play, in our broken down old apartment building, the lights don't always work, and that becomes a very effective combatant to our spiders. And I think that the audio sounds that they're using for these things moving, especially in no light, I think, will just absolutely terrorize you. Um, and one of the things that I absolutely love, we talked about in our eight-legged freaks in terms of my requirements for these spider films being, I love the webbing, and one of the things that they do here, which I thought was so smart, is this is an apartment building. So, we start off just as a normal apartment building. And then as we get further and further into the story, there's more and more webbing. You keep going down the stairwells and there's more webbing. There's a great hallway unveiling here that just will sit with you after you watch the film. That, from attention, we're going to keep going back to tension because that's what this film was. We have great visuals. Not necessarily an overabundance of gore. When they use it, it does work. But again, it is more so building that tension and then kind of getting those payoffs. And there are a lot of great scenes in here. Visually, I think this film is extremely well done. There's some great lighting, some mixtures of some greens and reds, and I think even some yellows in there, especially when, again, we'll have to get into spoilers where I can actually point out that scene because I had written it down. But, for me, it was just absolutely beautiful in between all the chaos that's going on. I don't really have too many critiques here. I think toward the end, it gets a little actiony for me, where it was a very intimate story for our characters and us just being with those group of characters. And then there's an extra added element where it moves rather quickly. So it's very actiony, but it doesn't really hinder the film. It just kind of briefly took me out of it because I wanted that more intimate feeling, especially as we work toward the end. But really, that was the only critique I had. I think sometimes maybe when we're getting into the CGI aspect, it's a necessary evil, especially when we're doing certain movements here. But sometimes it doesn't necessarily work for me. But again, nothing abrasively bad that takes you out of the film, because for the majority, for 98% of this film, absolutely so strong.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the ending does get a little actiony. It's fun, but it doesn't compare to the effectiveness of the earlier scenes in the film. The apartment building is a wonderful setting. I think they did a great job with it in Sting, but in here I think it's done even better because the just amassing scale of just how many spiders there are and just nothing is safe. Like, it genuinely, this feels, and they capture it so well that not a single room, not a single area in this apartment is safe anymore. When characters are sitting down, when they have their backs against walls, I am expecting something to just crawl up their arms because there's just so many of them, and they don't know where they're at. They've literally taken over, and it is maddening, and it's horrifying, and it absolutely just drove me insane. And I think the ending in and of itself, I love the very ending. I think that
Yes.
that's very it's emotionally well written and portrayed, acted, all of it. It's great. It's poignant, I should say. But I agree with you that there's a moment towards the end of this. There's kind of a reveal of sorts of something in front of them. And that's when it kind of gets like out of the realm of believability. And I was like, okay, well, they've kind of earned their stay here. I'll let this happen. And it kind of doesn't do anything. And then, they get to a certain point and then we move on. It's interesting. I didn't fully 100% get on board with that. I feel like that element, just that little section there, just kind of felt like they wrote themselves into a corner. They didn't necessarily know where they were going to go with that because of just the amount of chaos that goes on into that third act when they get into the part with the action. That it just kind of felt like they needed to go somewhere, and they were like, I don't necessarily know where to lead with this or what we're doing. Maybe they had this idea to introduce this element early on, but they just couldn't figure out where to place it, so they placed it there. It's a very minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. And again, it doesn't take away from the pure like tension and horror that I felt throughout this film. And it is something, though, that if I'm being completely forthcoming and honest, yes, I did also kind of say that kind of was a bit weak.
Yeah, I think sometimes no matter how good a film is, you get intertwined in those typical script beats. And, when you're looking at something like Sting, where you have a singular big spider villain, you're going to want that face off. Whereas Infested's a group of actual different, spiders. So it's kind of like you're vying for that kind of big bad face off, maybe in a sense. But, this film doesn't need anything like that. It just felt like we needed to build some sort of tension here and some sort of end cap. But like Dylan said, it doesn't really go anywhere. I think, when it gets certain of action, I wasn't really sure how they were going to get out of it. And I do feel like maybe they weren't entirely sure how they were going to get out of it, because once we kind of get to our very last scene, I find that very cathartic, especially with the subtext that we do understand of why our director wanted to make a film like this. So, by that ending there, I do find this extremely cathartic. I think from a tension perspective, the thing is, a master class in that visually. This thing is stunning as well. I think, I wasn't expecting a lot of the shots that we got for, a spider flick like this, but I am more than confident for the next installment of The Evil Dead after seeing this from a tension perspective, from what he was able to create with that lens. For me, I think with the action, everything like that, it just knocks it down a couple pegs. This is still a very strong recommend for me. Doesn't make that must-see category for me, but this one is something, if you're subscribed to Shudder, obviously you're going to check this out. Dylan and I had talked about this previously before even turning on the cameras, that this would be a great theater experience as well.
Yes.
Especially, I'd love to hear just the audio sitting in a theater. So this one for me, very, very strong recommend.
Absolutely. This is one that I would love to try to seek out and go see in a theater. I don't know how realistic that's going to be for us here in Ohio, but if it's there, I'm going to do my best to make some time, maybe take a couple of friends. My wife didn't sit down and watch this one with me like she did Sting, just because of timing. But it is one that I want them to sit down and check out again, because I think that this is the kind of movie that they were hoping for. It's a must see. For me, it's easily a must see. When you were talking horror films and you're talking films that affect you, again, guys, I can't sit here and say that to some of you, maybe I'm overhyping this. Maybe it won't affect you as much. Luke didn't have to, but I haven't had to turn a movie off because of how uncomfortable and how unsettled I was in many, many years. I felt like a little kid again, watching a movie that I've been told is the absolute scariest movie of all time. And it's not, but it's one of those things where you're just like, the tension and the buildup of it was so much that you kind of like build it up in your head so much that everything is scary. But that's not how I felt going into this. I was expecting this to be a breeze of a watch and kind of get through it, and then it will be a fine spider film. But just, I guess that caught me off guard with just how unsettled I was by it. So for me, this affected me in all the best ways possible. This is truly a film that scared me, and that is super rare. So it earns a must see for me from that point on. But again, presentation, acting, writing, it's all there. I totally understand why Luke puts it down to a recommend, which again is not bad. It's a very strong recommend, because I agree with him that third act is a little wonky. But for me, the fact that it scared me legitimately, there it goes. It's a must see. That's it. I'm not going to sit here and justify it anymore. Rip me up in the comments all you want if you guys don't feel that way, if you think I'm hyperbolic, but it got me, man. It got me. And I got to say, congrats to the filmmakers here. Because if you would have told me Infested was going to legitimately scare me, I would have said that no way. Because I'm a creature feature guy. I say it all the fucking time. I love these things. I watch so many of them, but I don't expect them to be this impactful. So good job. Good on you. Good on you. But yes, guys, thank you again over to the folks over at Shudder and IFC for, as always, sending this over. Another fantastic pick for Shudder and IFC, and we are not sponsored by them. Swear to God. If we ever are, we'll let you know. But like, Jesus, man, they are killing it this year. Like, they have had so many films that we have either given a recommend or I think a must see. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they've had a lot of good stuff. Really making up for last year, like 100%. And this is just another one that I'm so excited for you guys to see. Yeah, so it will be available here on Friday on Shudder. So definitely check this bad boy out and let us know down below what you guys think of Infested. So that's going to wrap us up here for now. We did just talk spoilers on Abigail, which was a fun, very different kind of movie than this, a lot more watchable and not as scary, but still pretty good. And yeah, we got a lot of other great stuff on the horizon. And yeah, that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, guys, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.